Welcome to Scifisteve circa 1950 spaceships. Today's tour is of the saucer from Earth versus the Flying Saucers. This is obviously one of Ray Harryhausen's best films as far as I'm concerned. It was the only one that I know of that he went off into the wonderful world of sci-fi and not fantasy. Ray, we miss you. Thanks. Let's cover the dimensions of the saucer now. The saucer that I have drawn is just under 90 feet across and just under 35 feet thick. The dome on the top is just under 50 feet in diameter and almost exactly 10 foot high. The lower pad is also the same diameter as the dome, just under 50 feet, but it's only about 5 foot thick. There are two rotating discs, counter-rotational discs. There's one on top, one on the bottom. None of the rest of the saucer moves. It's all stable, steady. But just these two discs, and the discs' speed and motion directly correlate to how fast the saucer is moving, whether it's going up, down, left, right. But you can hear when it's dead still. There's a scene on the beach. It starts rotating a little bit, hesitates for a second, then picks up speed, and the saucer lifts up high enough to drop the pedestal, right? And then when the thing takes off and goes into high speed, those two discs really pick up a hum. And we'll get into those when we do the interior of the ship and the magnetic drive that makes it go. Just a couple more items on the saucer. First of all, it's bulletproof, bomb-proof, grenade-proof, interceptor missile-proof, that kind of thing. And it's done that way by definition. I don't think there's like a force field around the ship. There was none that was ever indicated. And I only say that because when the ship was landed and resting on its pedestal, on the underside of the disc, you'll see that there's little nodules in three locations, and they seem to project a force field from the bottom of the saucer to the ground. And it comes up this sort of gray and it makes sort of a wavy sound. And the creatures could come out and operate underneath the saucer with impunity. Rifle bullets, we had anti-aircraft guns trying to get through it. The shield was quite impenetrable. So I figured, they made a real distinct presentation of that field. If they had had a field around the ship in flight that made it bulletproof or impervious, they probably would have shown it. So by definition, not by science, but by definition, the hull was impervious. I chose fusion reactors to power the ship, and I chose to operate them similar to the way that we are building them now. So the large donut-shaped tank you see around the outside fits the perimeter of the ship. It will probably have a deuterium-type fuel, hydrogen. I picked 3 fusion reactors, figuring because of the long journey, you could have any one of the reactors go down, subject to repair, and then come back online without the ship failing. Okay, alongside each one of the reactors, you'll notice there's a series of canisters. The canisters are the laser firing ignition system. All 9 of them plumb together into a single line and then fire into the reactors, setting the hydrogen gas off and making the heat necessary, first of all, to regenerate more heat to keep the reactor going. Notice that there are no generators. This is a direct heat conversion to electrical current. These experiments are currently being conducted now for the United States Navy. The United States Navy wants their submarines to have generators with no moving parts, and that's basically what I adapted here. The white coils you see going around the outside of the reactors pick up the direct heat, convert it to electricity, and then feed it into the system. So, okay, now let's add a little bit to the scene. Now, the first large copper ring that you see added there is actually tanks. There are a whole series of oxygen and water tanks, as they're going to be in space for some time. Now we're going to add the lower electromagnetic discs that attach to the lower disc that you see spinning on the outside. This is where the magnetic controls come in to allow the saucer to move. Now you can't see it very clearly here, so we're going to show it for just a moment, and then we're going to do the upper disc, but I want to show that they're in place and that they work and that they do counter rotation to the ones up above. Okay, now let's add the working space for our aliens. You can see that it's divided into 3 large sections going around the ship at 120 degrees, 3 hallways. This is dictated by the fusion reactors. The rooms are 7 feet high, which allows for the whirling magnetic material to move around, not collide with anything, and fit. Then when we take our walk through there, you'll notice we'll go from room to walkways to rooms to walkways, and you'll see how that all goes together a little bit later. Now let's introduce the upper plates. Notice on every plate there is a separate set of controls. These controls change the magnetic profile of the plate. Now these plates are super sensitive to electromagnetic current, creating a magnetic field around each plate. The faster the plates are turning, the larger the magnetic field that is being created, thus creating a magnetic field that he operates within. To tilt the ship and change directions, he decides, I'm going to tilt the ship here to the right. Every plate, as it passes around to the right position that he wants, changes the profile of the plate as it passes over that position, causing a dip in the magnetic field. This in turn causes the saucer to tilt slightly. It's then evened out and progress continues and they move. A quick look right now at the single weapon on the saucer. It drops out the bottom pedestal. The little hatch lifts up. The weapon drops down. It can then spin around. Just a note, it's hard to tell at this point, but that disc is almost 5 foot across. This is the pedestal in the down position. It's about 25 feet across and it's about 10 feet high, and the first thing you should notice is that's a little shy of the total height that was actually, I feel, in the movie. And I had to do that because if you was any taller and I push it up, I'm going to push it into the flight deck. That is, it's going to be too high. I could have periscoped it, but then it wouldn't have had the same look. You would have seen a second layer come down and then another one after that. The next thing you should notice, no door. When the one in the movie dropped down, the door was present. This is the only opening I know of in the ship, so I decided to make it an airlock and have a sealed tight door. With the airlock door open, it now exposes all of the mechanisms within the pedestal. The first thing I want you to notice are the 2 tall posts with the black spots on them and the flat round circle at the bottom. That is the elevator that goes up to the flight deck. It's an electromagnetic elevator. That is, our alien friends are electromagnetic geniuses. They know how things work. And that platform is simply pulled to the top using electromagnetism. There are no motors. If you take a close look at the 2 poles there on each side with the black spots on them, you'll notice that they get slightly smaller a certain distance up. That allows for periscoping. That is, when the hatch or the pedestal lifts, they will simply slide into the lower base so that they don't poke up into the flight deck. The remaining mechanisms that you see there are for the big cannon that drops out the bottom. Now, when the platform goes up, it will show the hatch. The arm on the right that acts like a hammer drops down, electromagnetically couples onto the hatch, lifts it out of position. Then the large gun swings around and drops down, putting the cannon right through that hole and locking it in so it's airtight. And then it can do its swivel thing and it can shoot all around the bottom, giving the ship its attack status. Quick ride up the elevator pad. You're now on board the flight deck of the Flying Saucer, and I believe that this is like a diplomatic ship. Humans that were captured were brought here, and they were first intimidated, and then eventually brainwashed. The intimidation was done via the screen that you're looking at in front of you, and they would show you flying over the city that they just abducted you from, moving you out beyond the atmosphere of the Earth in a matter of seconds, and then once in space beyond the moon, um, a few seconds after that. Look how powerful we are. Look how we can get around. They even demonstrated by blowing up a naval ship with a single punch. You cannot stop us. We have mobility, we have force, we have speed. Now, in the process of bragging, he explained how the ships use magnetic fields to move around. This gave Dr. Marvin the knowledge it would take later on in the show to create what was called an interrupter gun, which would break down the magnetic field around the saucer, causing it to drop like a stone. The other part that went on in here was the brainwashing procedure, and there was a crystal on top of the dome that looked sort of like a crystal rose to me. And it would come down with a beam, and your brain could be seen as the beam would pass over it. And they would simply read your entire brain and then select the knowledge that they found necessary for them to take over. I kind of liked that part. I don't know how it worked, but unfortunately, it left the owner of the brain a zombie. As we pan around the room, the first thing you're going to see here is this big silver block, and that's the back side of the control panel, where the two aliens they were flying the ship and they were interviewing their guests, right? And then eventually brainwashing their guests. And just over to the right of that is this screen. We never see what goes beyond the screen, but people who have started the brainwashing process are moved back there, and the process continues, and then the next time you see them, they're basically zombies. Now, before we go down to the lower decks, I want you to see the back side of the main screen. Here is a summary of all the critical information that the two pilots would need to fly the ship. And it's only visible from this side, but they can see through it and keep an eye on their guests. Never talked about it in the movie, but here's the small elevator that'll take an individual alien down to the next level. And the lower levels contain the control rooms, computer systems. It's where they're regenerated, things like that. And we'll get into that in just a few seconds. This is the aliens' refurbished station. They come here to get refurbished. More than food and water, but they come in here, their waste materials removed, oxygen supplies are refurbished, food and water is refurbished within the suit. They do not leave the suits ever, right? As we saw outside the ship, if the helmet's taken off, they disintegrate. We got to assume that inside, if you take the helmet off, they don't disintegrate. But as we saw, the helmet augments their various senses, seeing is one of them. Also, this is where they may come for long periods of hibernation during the flight from their solar system to our solar system. Now, what is critical about this in the design of the saucers, you can plainly see they have no hands. Their hands are covered up. So I designed the rest of the ship for them to be able to operate the rest of the ship from within the suit. That is, so when you go around the saucer, you will see that there are no dials, no levers, no buttons, no switches. Everything is done through direct communication from the suit to the station in front of them. A station is defined by that little platform you see them on. You know, see the other three are dark? When you step on the station, it lights up. That gives you process control to the panels directly in front of you, and you'll see that that is true throughout the rest of the ship. Here's where the aliens come to get their suits repaired. Notice along the wall each one of the components that would make up the suit: arms, legs, feet, chest plate, helmet. They're held in sterilized containers. In the center of the room is a mechanized procedure where the alien comes up, stands on it, scan, the offending part is removed automatically, the replacement part is brought out, put back into place, and the man is put back to work. This room is critical to the operation of the ship and makes star travel possible. Okay, this is the recycling room. Air, water, food, waste material, everything comes in here as electronically reestablished back to pure air, pure water, pure food. This is 100% recycled. Nothing from the ship is ever ejected. This is what allows the aliens to stay in space for 10 years at a time. Because it played such an important part in the alien speech about how their systems work, this is the infinitely indexed memory system. It is basically a very large computer, even by today's standard. It is all solid state. There is no moving media of any kind. It coordinates the entire ship's functions, probably assists in the communications between the suits and the control panel in front of them, but flight control, fusion reactors, weaponry, environment processes are all coordinated through here. This is the heart of the flight center. Here we have all the instrumentality it takes to describe the magnetic field being created by the ship to keep it aloft. Here we can get the physical readouts of energy being used, a description of the magnetic field being created, the location of the disks in rotation. This is what it takes to keep a magnetic ship aloft. Here are the monitors for the fusion reactors. It only puts up one fusion reactor at a time, but of course they can toggle through them. See the status, fuel control, consumption, things like that, amount of heat, amount of current being put out. This is the weapons panel. This is the offensive and defensive systems of the ship. The first large screen there is for tracking objects. You notice it becomes smaller in the lower screen on the bottom there, which includes other items that tracks the objects. Gives you percentages of hits and things like that that could occur. It also is for tracking items on the ground if you wanted to track a ground item. Over on the right panel, you notice is sort of a silhouette of the big gun, and it gives the status of the big gun, firing times available. It's not an infinite gun, of course, can't fire forever and ever and ever. You saw the tanks on the wall. It requires some kind of fuel to make it go. I want to thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the drawings, and that concludes our tour of the saucer from Earth versus the Flying Saucers.